There's iconic movie cars, and there's iconic car movies. For generations, Hollywood has looked towards the car industry and the young generation of racers for inspiration and plot lines. And many movie stars have become enthusiasts and racers in their own right. So we're continuing the kind of Hollywood car, movie car theme with this episode, but we're focusing a little more on maybe cars that didn't stand out in movies, but the entire movie was about cars. So a lot of them are going to be racing movies, you know, or kind of that type of a deal. And the interesting thing is, so the very first movie that was basically about car racing that actually had sound, so you could actually hear the cars as they're going around, was called The Crowd Roars. And that starred, you know, James Cagney, and that was in the late 20s.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're talking 20s now for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that was obviously when sound kind of first came available, was, you know, in the 1920s, before, you know, he had the silent films.
Right.
But that was the very first movie that had car racing with sound in it. And it was entirely based around, obviously, car racing.
And it made a lot of sense because car racing in the early teens was giant. It was huge. You got to remember that there weren't a lot of other sports going on. Like baseball was your major sport. That was recorded.
Football was kind of just starting.
Football's just kind of started. Basketball was not even thought of.
No.
I mean, well, I don't want to say not thought of, but it wasn't a professional sport.
It wasn't a huge.
So automotive racing was a huge deal, and also too the feats also too that were happening in automotive racing. You know, guys going a mile a minute. You know, people going 100 miles an hour. You got to remember that people were riding horses. You know, only 15 to 20 years prior to that.
Still
right.
Some,
we're still riding horses.
Still transitioning to
so so car, anything automotive related through the 20s and even into the 30s was a big deal.
Yeah. Because you had that, and you had the Great Race, you know, was another movie that kind of capitalized or was all about, you know, automotives.
Right.
You know, you really start to see then the racing cars and the racing movies, you know, really kind of ramp up towards the 60s into the 70s.
And which made sense. I mean, again, too, that's when automotive just got popular. You know, you got your returning World War II veterans. You've got, you know, younger people, too, that are becoming driving age. So automotive was a big deal then. And you have a few B movies throughout the 60s that made some sense. Yeah. You know, you've got your Faster Pussycat, which is always a strange movie.
Yeah,
but
well, and there's
even cars in it.
Yeah, well, honestly, there was even a Fast and Furious in the late 50s. Right. That was actually very similar to the later Fast and the Furious.
That's correct.
You know, that you know, featured cars. The racing kind of really took a whole nother turn, I guess you could say, with a couple of movies called Grand Prix and Le Mans.
Absolutely.
Where they actually kind of started, not started, but they really focused on getting the more realistic racing out of it. And they would mount the cameras on the cars. They would, you know, turn race cars into cameras, basically, to try to capture that.
Or even create, it wouldn't be a race car, but they would create a vehicle that could attach to a car that they would get a closer angle or a closer view of it. So, you know, now you're starting to get not just the cutaway cars, but you're getting specific cars that are built only for like a certain scene. And Grand Prix follows the story of obviously Formula One. Formula One being kind of a, I don't want to say a young sport at the time, but it was definitely a sport that was up and coming. James Garner is the lead actor in the movie. It was said that James Garner, he actually was such a good driver that people were saying that he could actually qualify and run at the time at Formula One.
Yeah. And he was just as good as any of the racers or the stunt drivers.
Which he went on. I mean, James Garner had a great career in racing. He went on to a lot of, you know, Baja races and stuff like that. So he was involved with it all the way up until his death. So,
and, you know, we mentioned some of the names of some of the, you know, builders and stuff like that, where, you know, guys like, you know, Bill Cushenberry actually worked on a lot of the mounts on those cars, because obviously nose cars. But yeah, you had to, you know, there weren't GoPros.
No.
You know, these were big Panavisions, real, you know, actual film cartridges, like these were
movie cameras.
they were movie cameras that weren't easy to mount onto a car, so you kind of had to create it.
Right. Well, I know there's an iconic picture from a photo from a Grand Prix where it shows, you know, at the time Grand Prix, I want to say it came out in 66 or 67.
66, yeah.
Is it 66? Okay. So the iconic picture that I love to look at is that there's a GT40 that has been reconfigured into a camera car.
Yeah.
That if you look at it, there's even the body of the race car is attached to the GT40.
Yeah, the body of the race car doesn't have front, you know, wheels and tires on it, or steering, obviously.
No steering, right?
But it's hitched to the back of the camera vehicle.
So the movie studio saw that the GT40 had just won Le Mans, and now we're going to use that as the camera car, or you know.
Well, I mean, it's got to go faster than the other race cars, so I mean.
It's amazing.
You always got to remember that.
Right. It's amazing.
Whatever the camera car is, if it's in front, it's got to go faster than the other ones.
So these movies were state of the art. This was whatever was the best of the best at the time, Grand Prix and also Le Mans, which now, Le Mans is a very unusual movie because they filmed over 2,500 hours of racing footage without a script.
They just go capture it. Whatever you can, and then we'll
figure
the story out later.
And that's what they did. They figured the story out.
Yeah.
So story-wise, the movie sucks, but racing
probably because they just figured it out later.
Right.
Yeah.
Racing-wise, it's the Rosetta Stone. It is when you start looking at the angles and you start going, "Wow, my GoPro now the low slung angle of the tire that's spinning in front."
Yeah,
that's from Le Mans, right?
No, and that's they had to get a little bit creative, with a lot of that and kind of develop a certain technique or develop something to make it. It wasn't necessarily just your, car sitting on the trailer,
right?
Behind a truck that had the camera attached to it, and kind of faking it, and maybe the angle and the height's not exactly right, with the background, but they were taking race cars, like you said, and turning them into camera cars and mounting them in order to capture the essence of racing, because racing is a whole different experience than just driving down the road.
Right.
Or even a car chase or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
and Steve McQueen obviously was the right person for that. I mean, he had already been involved with racing, already made Bullet, already was a stuntman and did the stunt driving in Bullet. So he was kind of the key guy to say, you know what? Yeah, we'll let him. And I think that's why the studio actually let him get away with it. Right? Because you couldn't have your run-of-the-mill guy walk-off actor to say, okay, we're going to put you in this car and go racing.
Yeah.
Steve already had that ability to do that.
Well, and that's what you said with James Garner being a racer as well that was in Grand Prix. So you had the stars, were car people, were racing, so they knew what they were doing to an extent that, was beyond just a regular actor.
This is just a side thing that I just thought of that makes, kind of a lot of sense, but not that much sense. But you think of a guy like Paul Newman, who was an actor. Yeah. Which he was in a movie called Winning. So I shouldn't really take this. I mean, that was actually, it's not the greatest movie as far as racing, but Paul Newman was a very accomplished race car driver and held many championships. But the car movie he's known for the most is an animated series called Cars.
Maybe to some generations in the past, but yeah, and he's known for other stuff like salad dressing.
Yeah, that's true. This is true.
and a lot of good movies.
It's delicious.
Yeah. Well, and that's, so, in the 70s, obviously we had some racing movies, but then we had some hot rod movies.
Correct.
American Graffiti, that's kind of a very iconic, hot rod movie. Right. And kind of helped launch George Lucas's career, helped launch a lot of the careers of those kind of, the next generation of guys. But it was based a lot around what George Lucas saw growing up in Central California, where you'd go out racing on Friday night or Saturday night, or you'd go to a cruise night.
Right. So, I mean, that was that generation's kind of every Saturday night. Right. And I mean, and it spilled over to even our generations where cruising was made popular. Yeah. I want to say that American Graffiti is it's an A movie with a B movie feel. Right.
And a movie cast.
And it's got an A movie cast, but at the time they weren't.
At the time they weren't.
They weren't, right? I mean, you've got your Harrison Fords, you've got your Ron Howards, you've got your Richard Dreyfuses, your Suzanne Summers. I mean, there's tons of stars in that movie. But
that was that helped kick off a lot of their careers.
Right.
And there were several similar ones where we were talking about all that with Corvette Summer.
Oh my God.
You know, so you had Mark Hamill was you know, in that pre-Star Wars.
No, after Star Wars.
Oh, it was after Star Wars.
And so that was the funny thing about this. So he was the
that's
big
the thing,
star.
like pretty much Mark Hamill's like, yeah, like Harrison Ford's done a million movies.
Right.
Mark Hamill's you're Star Wars. Sorry, you're Luke.
And I'll tell you why. In between when he filmed Star Wars, after he filmed Star Wars, he was involved in a horrible car accident.
Oh.
And it was right after the filming of Corvette Summer as well. So and that's the reason why The Empire Strikes Back.
That's why it got delayed a little.
It got delayed because he was. And if you watch kind of the first part of some of The Empire Strikes Back, they don't really show a lot of him.
I remember seeing that on the Star Wars behind the scenes where they did some different angles and stuff to hide certain interests.
But you know, he was smart though. At the time, again, cars were extremely popular. People customizing cars were crazily popular. So Corvette Summer came out in '78, same summer as Grease Lightning or Grease. And we've been bringing up this guy's name a lot, but Eddie Paul was one of the guys that was behind the building of that classic Stingray. Now, one thing that always sticks out to me in this movie crazy is that the car starts red, candy red, and then they repaint the car gold in the movie. But being a car painter, knowing that gold is the base for candy apple red. So it's just funny how they filmed it. So they filmed.
Should have been the other.
It should have been the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So they filmed like the middle of the movie when the car's gold first. Then they painted the car and obviously did the first and the last part. So you know, a little behind the scenes, but another crazy movie. Annie Potts. If any of you guys watch Ghostbusters or Designing Women, I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's kind of launched her career as well. She's a great actress in that movie too. But the car itself, come on, right-hand drive Corvette. The black formula that he ends up shooting at the Pontiac formula that he shoots at the end of the movie. It's just one of those car movies.
Yeah. No, and there's plenty of other ones that kind of came around that time as well with Hollywood Nights.
Oh, yeah.
Tony Danza, Michelle Pfeiffer, and that actually featured Project X.
That's right.
The Hot Rod, Carcraft magazine.
Popular Hot Rodding.
Popular Hot Rodding, that's right.
Yep.
That yellow Bel Air that's gone through many changes. That was, a highlight of that. And that's probably because of, location too. You're Southern California.
Yeah. Van Nuys Boulevard. Another cruising movie.
Yeah. That was a prime spot for cruising back in the day, and they just looked to capture that. The California Kid.
Okay.
And we know that as a kind of an iconic hot rod.
Correct.
That was Pete Shaporis, the Pete and Jake, SoCal Speed Shop fame. But that was your classic flamed out, 32 coupe.
That's obviously, that's one of those iconic cars that you look up. If you're ever going to build a 33 coupe, that's the car you're going to build. Martin Sheen is actually he's the lead actor in that movie. And that actually helped launch his career as well. But the car itself, the car is what sold that movie. If you end up watching that movie, and the funny thing, that movie was a made for TV movie too as well, which if you're old enough to remember made for TV movies, those were very special. That was the
Eleanor car is such a popular thing within the aftermarket. You can you pop up on here, I typed in Eleanor.
Right.
And obviously there's multiple, Mustangs, but there are several that are your Eleanor replica cars.
Yes.
Looking right here, we got a, 67 fastback with the Eleanor,
body kit on it.
Front end. The first word in the description is Eleanor. Full NASCAR, racing engine under the hood. They've done all the subframe connectors,
does it have
all of that stuff.
The Go Baby Go button?
Let's find out.
Okay. That's
got a lot of got obviously the fog light, double fog light up front.
Yeah. Side exhaust there, and
you got the little, little projector headlights. In there, so that's kind of the iconic Eleanor look with the the hood.
I'm sure it does though. That's you can't have an Eleanor without a Go Baby Go button.
It's you kind of have to, but here's another one, a 68 tribute.
Yeah,
at least they say they're tribute car,
right.
Not an actual Eleanor.
Too bad,
of any
totally
kind.
different car though.
But because it was a 67, right?
Yeah, 67 is the KR500.
Is what they use. Yeah.
The 68s look different.
But that's 68. It's similar is enough, but this was actually a licensed Eleanor creation.
Wow.
It actually includes a poster that was signed by Nicolas Cage and Angelina Jolie. So if you're a Gone in 60 Seconds fan of Eleanor car, fan of Nicolas Cage, go for it. And yes, there is a Go Baby Go button.
You gotta have
this
it.
one.
Gotta have it.
And even the dash is signed by Carol Shelby.
Of course, yes.
So
yes,
yeah, you can, if you want an Eleanor car, there's a couple of them up on Hemmings.com right now. Special in quotes.
Yes.
Yeah, they weren't the greatest movie. They were lower budget. Yeah, the quality was not always, there. It was kind of, now we look at streaming or something like that where that's like as good, if not better, but yeah.
Right.
TV movie, straight to tape or straight to DVD.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
Those were your lower end ones. And then there was a lot of B movies that were car movies.
Yeah.
Because I don't, maybe they didn't have the acting chops in some of those movies, but they could smash some cars up and do some cool stuff.
You don't have to pay the car.
Attention. It's true.
I mean, that's the whole thing. If you're a movie producer trying to make it in Hollywood, you're going to do some B movies, and it's hard to get talent. So,
I mean, there was the movie called The Car.
That's true. That's correct. I think now I don't remember if that was a made for TV movie either, because it's along the same lines as far as, quality of made. And I know that
2-lane blacktops and
well, that's a funny thing too. You mentioned 2-lane blacktop. So 2-lane blacktop and American Graffiti do share the 55 Chevy. Right, because 2-lane blacktop obviously came out before, and George Lucas, knew about that, and they actually used that car for the end. They used it as the field car for that Harrison Ford drives.
Yeah,
was actually the same car that James Taylor and Dennis Wilson drove in 2-lane blacktop. So, and again, too, 2-lane blacktop is a movie about street racing.
Yeah,
I mean, literally, it's just a movie about guys going from town to town to try to get more street races. So it's an unusual kind of subject that might be close to our heart.
No, but there's movies about everything, and they're going to try to capitalize on maybe what's popular or maybe a little underground. But, you had Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry.
Oh, okay. Yes.
That kind of was an iconic car B movie, if you will.
And anybody that's got a Sublime lime green Charger is definitely someone's gonna walk up to you and say, "Where's Peter Fonda at?" Right. And of course, at the end, the iconic scene where the Charger gets smashed into the train and blows up. One of the best slow motion shots I've ever seen, where you actually see the gas cap explode off the top of it. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah.
Movie not so good.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Put in the B movie car, car B movie category.
And for the irony, excuse me, everybody. And the irony of that movie is Vic Morrow is the cop that's chasing him in the helicopter. Vic Morrow dies of decapitation by a helicopter blade in the Twilight Zone movie.
So full circle.
The full circle.
Call back.
Yep.
And there was some kind of horror movies too that were car themed, and car related, where the car was possessed.
Yes.
You talk about Christine. As John Carpenter, who's you put that name in any horror genre movie, you're good. The Wraith,
which is a strange show.
Tell me more. Yeah.
The Wraith, from what I remember about it, it was a futuristic car that had its own mind of its own type thing, and they were building off the kit thing.
Pre-AI.
Yeah, totally pre-AI. And they were building off the kit thing because this is, I want to say the Wraith came out in 83, 84.
Yeah, it was the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's definitely after kit had come out. But the craziest thing about the Wraith is, if you listen to the soundtrack of it, like when that car starts up, it's clearly not the car that they're filming, because that was some type of concept car. I want to say it was a Chrysler or something like that. But when that car starts up, it had to have been something that was a very healthy, because you hear the lump cam, you hear the freaking, just the beautiful crisp exhaust that comes out of that.
They want to make it something powerful, something medium.
And it's this car that probably had a 4-cylinder in it or something like that.
Well, you want to talk about 4 or probably less than 4 cylinders. Herbie
the Love Bug. Right.
Herbie the Love Bug.
Yes.
That
which was in a ton of movies. Disney had a whole series of those movies. I mean,
yeah, they even did some more. Recently in the last 20 years, where they brought it back,
right?
And obviously the Volkswagen Bug has been a popular thing in a lot of different movies and kind of played a key role in a lot of them. But this was a movie where the main character was a car,
right?
Well,
you're talking those kind of Disney movies. I mean, one that kind of comes up to my mind from being a kid watching on TV, usually every Christmas time, was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. Mm-hmm. Strange flying car. So
yeah, no, and that's that's the thing. It is make the car the main character, or just kind of integrating the car into the whole storyline.
Right. Well, speaking about that, then let's talk about this. Getting back into racing.
Yeah.
Jeff Bridges, Last American Hero. Movie about car racing, literally about him trying to break into stock car racing. It launched his career. I want to say he got a Academy Award nomination for it. Didn't win for it, though. Obviously, he wins later on in his life. But that is it's kind of a B movie, but it's a healthy movie about a struggle trying to be a race car driver.
Yeah, and there was a lot of those. I mean, you look at Tom Cruise with Days of Thunder.
Oh, yeah.
That was like your quintessential 90s kind of NASCAR.
And loosely written about a real driver,
Okay.
Tim Richmond. Tim Richmond at the time was probably one of the most talented race car drivers, not just NASCAR, because he actually had an open wheel career before, but he was involved in a car accident qualifying for Indy, and his parents asked him to get out of racing because of that.
Yeah.
So he said, "This is safer." So
kinda,
right,
mean,
but the whole story is loosely based around Tim Richmond being the driver, and then obviously we have our Randy Quaid character that's playing the part of.
So if you're still rocking your stock stereo system, you need some help. And you need to go to Powerbase and check out their OEM direct fit line of speakers. Basically a plug and play operation on any newer Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Nissan, you name it. And I actually got a full set in my Toyota 4Runner. It sounds amazing, especially considering you're basically just replacing the factory speakers. So go check them out at powerbaseusa.com. Use the code AUTOREV24 and you can get 10% off anything on the site, including these cool little Bluetooth speakers. This one right here is the Sound Cube. Clip it onto your backpack, take it down to the beach. And what's really cool is this split speaker. So you can put one in the kitchen, one in the backyard at a party. Everyone's having a good time listening to the same music. Basically got like full stereo, almost surround sound system in this little package. So if you use the code AUTOREV24, you can get 10% off. So go check them out and take a listen. So you've been following along on Auto Revolution, you know that we're a big fan of Chevy OBS trucks. And Beltec Suspension has been around for 40 years, and they were one of the first innovators of the sport truck movement back in the 80s. And we've been lucky with them to partner on a few different projects, from the OBS Clash documentary series to the Tahoe Unlimited, and even a few things we've got up our sleeves coming out later this year. What's really cool is they've partnered with us to offer free shipping if you use the code AUTOREVOLUTION24 at beltec.com. So whether it's a lowering kit on your Chevy or a lift kit on your Bronco or your Jeep, and if you use the code AUTOREVOLUTION24 at beltec.com, you're going to get free shipping. Now back to the show.
The other guy. Not the other guy. Come on. The other guy. Come on. We're going to have to edit this because this is bad. Who's the dude that's the Richard Childress? But it's not Richard Childress. That's, what's his face? That's Earnhardt. Come on. It's, everybody knows this guy.
Well, so Tom Cruise was Cole Trickle.
Yes.
John C. Reilly, Buck Breath.
Yeah.
Randy Quaid was Tim Dallin.
Tim Dallin's the character I'm talking about, but he portrays, who's the guy that everybody, like Ray Everham works for him right now? It's not Richard Childress. Damn it.
We're going to have to.
Yeah, no, we have to totally do this over again because this is.
But it does actually feature several actual race car drivers in there.
Oh, definitely.
Richard Petty, Rusty Wallace.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of the commentators,
Mike LaJoy
was on there.
So, and that's another thing too. The NASCAR did not want Days of Thunder to be made. They felt it was too dangerous, and it showed the sport in a more of a reckless way. At the time, remember, NASCAR was trying to go mainstream. They were trying to go, housewives being into that. So when this movie was made, they didn't have the blessing from NASCAR. And most of the cars that they even, trashed in that movie, most of the sponsors said that they didn't want to be any part of it as well. So obviously Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson, they went out and, got all the sponsors that they wanted to showcase to help them build the movie. Don Simpson actually, before his death, he actually stars in this movie. He's one of the drivers, which is kind of an iconic thing, which again, people don't realize that he's really that driver. And I think until the credits. So,
was it Bill France?
No,
Bill. Well, that's France's NASCAR founder.
Right.
But yeah, they're talking about
Jeff Gordon's driver. Jeff Gordon's owner. I don't have a phone. I'm telling you, he always buys every Corvette every year at Barrett Jackson. He's the first guy to buy the Corvettes. He's got
Hendricks?
Hendricks, that's his name. Bam!
I mean, that's one of the most recognizable names in NASCAR.
That took forever, man.
Yeah.
It took forever for me to...
That would have been like my first thing to think of, but I thought it was too easy.
It's my first... But yeah, basically that movie is based around those guys, those two guys.
They pulled a lot of different stories from a lot of the kind of deal to have that on there. But yeah, and that really kind of stood out as an iconic, racing movie and NASCAR racing movie at that time. But you look at even like Stallone had like the IndyCar one. It didn't quite do as good, but
when they're driving Indy cars on the street, chasing each other, it's a little far fetched.
But yeah, so you had that. Later on, I mean, who cannot quote Ricky Bobby?
Oh, of course.
Talladega Nights. It's kind of obviously like more of the comedic spoof kind of version of Days of Thunder, maybe.
Right.
And got the cougar, the Mercury cougar, like the cougar on the hood.
Right. Karen.
It's
Karen Racing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even talking about like the Le Mans, F1 guy racer coming into the U.S. and like take, that whole battle and stuff like that. So, and of course, if you're not first, you're last.
That's it.
So
that's it.
That's, definitely an iconic racing movie for me, at least, because it kind of makes fun of a lot of
it totally does.
The racing part of it. Don't take it too seriously because you're still driving around a circle in a car.
Right.
But, in the last several years, there's been a lot of racing movies that, are kind of based on some of the history.
Sure.
Obviously, you're talking about Rush with Lauda.
Niki Lauda and obviously James Hunt.
Yeah.
Right.
The Snake versus Mongoose. We have some personal with that of having worked with, Mongoose in the magazines, having met, the Snake, met, Don Prudhomme.
Right.
And they kind of were looking to show, they had like some of the racing aspect, but they were trying to show a lot of the whole deal of the struggle of, traveling around the country, being town to town, being the showmans,
right?
And then the kind of the journey of taking it into a little bit more mainstream and having your model cars and your Hot Wheels versions and stuff like that. So, that really kind of, I think, pinnacled, a few years ago with Ford versus Ferrari.
Absolutely.
And they really looked at that to make it authentic, to make it fairly, and obviously there's going to be some mistakes or some, off years of here and there, but they, recreated basically a track.
Right.
The whole facade, the look of it. They, filmed it at a hangar that, where originally a lot of the cars were developed at.
Well, the great thing I think about that movie is that you're right. If you're looking for the exact story, watch a documentary.
Yeah.
Right. This is a movie that needs to have some entertainment to it. So some of the stuff is stretched, but for the most part, Ford versus Ferrari is pretty spot on. Mm-hmm. Even down to, Shelby had his shop, obviously, first off in Venice, which you see in the movie.
Yeah.
Which it's not his shop, but the original shop's still there.
Yeah.
But when they moved to the LAX airport, they moved to the Pan Am hangar. And if you look at the plane, it even says Pan Am. Like they went down to
that's
the
yeah.
research.
They wanted to make sure
they
that
made it
the,
right.
the timing and the look was right for everything, and you know, and the racing in it is
amazing,
extraordinary.
Well, not only that, I to me the best part about Ford versus Ferrari is that it introduces the world to Ken Miles. Which I had, as a kid, had heard stories about Ken Miles, but, you know, he had passed away in practice at Riverside, you know, afterwards.
And everyone, knows the name Carroll Shelby, looks at the Shelby as the iconic thing. But yeah, there's always a team. There's always other guys behind all of that.
Right. And it's an amazing story. It truly is an amazing story. And it's a great movie. I mean, it really is an entertaining movie.
No, and recently, they're kind of in a similar vein, but there's the Gran Turismo movie.
Right.
And so that kind of obviously based on the video game, but then based on a real life contest.
Yes. Yeah.
That basically got a kid,
right.
You know,
that
had just been playing the video game to then actually train and win races and race in legitimate races and qualify. You know, with Nissan. And
the blowover scene where the car actually blows
lifts,
over at Nuremberg, where it actually lifts and spins over, it actually happened.
Yeah.
That wasn't just a movie deal. Like, that clearly happened, and someone did actually lose their life. You know, one of the spectators was hit by the car.
Yeah.
You know, so again, that movie's as close, I think, as you can get to what the real thing was, but again, it's made for Hollywood.
Yeah. No, but they really tried to capture that. You know, so they had, and I think now we'll get into some of the behind the scenes aspect of some of these cars and the racing, you know, part of it. But yeah, they really tried to capture the realism of the car racing, but also have the actors, you know, be visible in it, because it was a lot about these, you know, younger kids or these guys, you know, learning how to race and qualifying for that. So usually maybe you'd have a stunt guy, you know, a racer. And of course, if you're in a race suit and a helmet, like, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
But, you know, they really wanted to showcase that. So, you know, they would rig up these GTRs and stuff like that with like a remote, you know, camera system. So like you had your camera overhead that was shooting that car, but the actor in the car wasn't driving the car.
Right.
You know, he was just steering, and obviously you had to learn and know what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But for maybe safety and for just performance sake, you had a race car driver, like, basically either on the roof of the car or behind the car that was actually driving.
Yeah, it's like a crow's nest thing. Like, you're like tall, like it's almost if you're floating on top of the car.
Yeah, because obviously you can't have it like right there, otherwise it'll get in the camera way. And then and they'll can take some of that out in CGI afterwards, but at least you're still getting kind of a real experience, and you're not having to fake it with an actor, you know, teach them. Whereas like guys like obviously go back to your James Garner, Paul Newman, you know, even to Paul Walker, to, you know, Tom Cruise or Keanu Reeves. Like, they know how to drive cars really well. They know how to race. They know how to do a lot of these things. But, you know, maybe they got to say certain lines while they're doing it. So it's, you know, having that concentration, whereas you can get some legit action out of it from having the actual race car driver, you know, above and over behead.
Right.
That was something that's commonly used throughout every movie, not just a car movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you look at the advancement. I mean, you know, we talked about the cutaway cars and, you know, episode before, where they actually take like the front end of the car off and you're shooting like through the windshield, but, and there's different configurations of that, where sometimes they cut half of the car in half, where you can actually still see the windshield or the A-pillar, but the whole, maybe half of the front of the car is completely gone and it's mounted on a trailer. Right. The other thing too,
and then you're actually driving it on a street.
Yeah.
With using all real natural background and all that stuff, or you're in a studio and it's just sitting there and you're, you know.
I mean, even back in the day, what they would do is sometimes they'd run a film projector, which I know now they have a way more advanced system now.
Oh, yeah.
But back in the day, you'd run a film projector with behind it, and just as the
and you could tell that
you could totally tell,
yeah.
right? But I mean, that was, you know, until
then, yeah.
right until you started doing it for real with
Yeah.
advanced computer. Now you can totally tell. You can look at it and go, oh, that's in a studio,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's, so obviously later they would do some green screen stuff.
Yeah.
But then now what you have is your full 3D, or excuse me, LED wall.
Right.
So they'll go out, they'll film what they need, or maybe they'll mix in some CG graphics and stuff like that.
Right.
That just, displays on the wall. That also provides natural lighting.
Yeah.
That is going to actually give, because it's not a projector that's projecting onto the wall.
Right.
So you're just getting bounce. You're actually getting projection of light. So the realism is going to be better.
Yes.
On that. And also too, they've got it where you can sync the cameras up to what's being shown. So that way, it looks like you're actually moving the camera and
right.
the background's changing, or making a turn, and it's going to change the
you actually, it looks like the car is making a
yeah.
turn, right? And the nice thing about that too is, if you think about it, even for time period pieces where it'd be super difficult to get 50 1920s cars on a scene, so they'll computer generate that and have that as playing in the background. But then now the cutaway car is something that they can build, and now they can do those period time things, because like I said, where are you going to get a bunch of cars from 100 years ago?
Well, it's like, I mean, the movie Tucker, I think they said every single Tucker that was in existence was in that movie.
Was in the movie, right?
Because there's only like 40, 50 of them.
Yeah.
So
but
that's, we talked about the car wranglers, the car coordinators, even for general movies that weren't a car movie or a racing movie, you'd still have those guys that, if you're talking about doing a period piece in the 70s, okay, well, you need all these cars.
Right.
And the funny thing, and I noticed this with, I think it was the TV show Unsolved, about like the Tupac and Biggie, murders and stuff like that, so that's obviously the mid 90s.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, oh yeah, it's going to be all these cars you see there. No, it's all 80s cars.
80s cars, because no one has much money to buy a brand new car.
Most people are driving a car that's probably 5 to 10 years old.
Yeah.
They're not every single person on the road is driving a brand new car.
Right.
So that's not going to be realistic. So if you really got a good car coordinator, they're going to think about that.
Right.
They're going to look at, okay, what were people driving back then?
Yeah.
Just average every day out on the street in LA. And the same thing for, you go back, you do, Gangster Squad,
right?
Which was obviously in the 40s. So we got a bunch of cool 30s, early 40s cars, and you got to populate a street with, a handful of them parked on the side of the road, a couple of them driving. So you're talking 20 cars,
right? All
have to be period, kind of correct. And it's going to take some people to kind of wrangle those up.
Right.
And
it's the same thing in racing. I mean, if you look at a lot of old race cars get retired.
Yeah.
They come out of certification, the sanctioned bodies, they get wrecked. It might be a team that dissolved, but usually what happens, those cars get snatched up and they'll go to, they don't all go to a private collection. They'll go to a movie house. They'll go to places where they'll repurpose those cars for a lot of things.
Well, and that's exactly it. A place like Picture Car Warehouse, Cinema Vehicles, they've got a whole lot, in warehouses of just cars.
Yeah.
Because, hey, do you need a police car from New Jersey in the 1980s?
Right.
All right, sure. Boom. They've got the, Caprice or maybe the Crown Vic or something.
Right.
Sitting out there.
Yeah.
Well, all it needs is these specific lights. That, maybe it needs to be painted or wrapped a certain color if it's not, black and white.
Right.
And then here, throw some badging and numbers on it, and boom, you've got now a cop car that maybe next week that might be,
a taxi.
A taxi.
Right.
A yellow taxi in New York, or a, California Highway Patrol car.
Right, right.
So they could just, boom, interchange that. Same with a lot of the ambulances.
Yeah.
I know that they would have, your standard Econoline ambulances, and then they would maybe swap a front end if it had to be a newer one.
Right.
Or they have that same ambulance that then you spray it black or wrap it black, throw some SWAT,
and all of a sudden
badging on it. It looks like a SWAT van.
Right.
Or a SWAT, truck or something like that. So, having those, a lot of the Dukes of Hazzard, a lot of those early things kind of helped build that industry.
Right.
And then now it's like, yeah, go online, type in, I need this car. I want to rent it for a day for $600, or something like that. And there would a lot of times obviously be maybe specific requests from the director or the writer, or maybe the star of the movie, that wanted a specific car that they would drive around in.
That's more common than people think.
Yeah.
Where the director, again, too, think of a director. A director has an idea, has a vision, it's in his head. He's trying to tell it. So if the guy says, I want a blue BMW because that's where I lost my virginity in.
Yeah, that's a true story. Not for me, but for a movie that, like I said, at the time when I was visiting, they were working on, The Hangover. They were working on the Ashton Kutcher Just Friends or No Strings Attached, whatever. That movie, and they wanted a 80s, BMW, and had to be blue. But the BMW that they had wasn't blue, so they painted it blue.
Yeah.
And, they would do that all the time. Or you look at some of those, the Mad Max, Fury Road, or even the early Mad Max stuff where it's some contraption based on something where it's like, okay, that's going to be a big rig tanker truck with Volkswagen Bug, mounted on it, and a front cow catcher, grate made out of a fence or something like that.
With a guy
and it's all
playing
rusty,
guitar, too.
and the guy, so it's like, okay, here, this is what we need, this is what we want. Go and create it.
Honestly, though, the Mad Max series, or the for the Road Warrior, all of these, movies, for the most part, to me, I think they are sci-fi. Like, you wouldn't see that car driving down the road, but
no, but that's
to me,
in that world that they created. Yeah.
To me, just the creativeness, like you bring up, the one of those big rigs. They have a 59 Fleetwood Cadillac is one of the top.
That's
deals on top of those big rigs. The early monster truck, the 30s looking monster truck that drives through the thing. I mean, honestly, whoever the set director was for that movie, or whoever the car designer, this guy had an imagination.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's the thing. It's just then kind of like adding stuff, because you got to think, and this is part of what they did. Obviously, is okay. Think about whether it's in a certain time period or a certain world or whatever, like what would these characters do? Right. So obviously it's post-apocalyptic. Yep. So it's just going to be junk probably lying around, all different pieces. They're trying to get gas, get the fuel. So, a tanker truck is going to be your bet. Right. Once you get there, you got to fill the thing up. Yeah. And then it is just mounting stuff on it for looks or for other uses, or added armor or added protection. But obviously those then become kind of their own, kind of character a little bit. Yeah. And that's, we mentioned, just kind of having your stars that maybe would request something specific. You look at like the Iron Man movies. Robert Downey Jr. is a car guy. Yeah. And in that, my Iron Man character is going to be a car guy. Yeah. So he's going to have a hot rod. He's going to drive an Audi around, and of course, sometimes they got to do things with those cars, like crush them. Yes. Yes. So like a Shelby Cobra, they're going to crush it. They're not going to use an actual Shelby Cobra. No. So you would hire one of these, warehouses, like we said, or production houses to create what it would look like, but make it cheap, make it crushable. And then, that piece alone could then be auctioned off, let's say, for charity or something like that, or tour around with, movie memorabilia. If exactly. You will. So, one of the interesting, kind of things as well too, talking about like the 80s style, we talked about Miami Vice and all those in the last one. Well, when you're now making a period piece, you got to obviously kind of capture that era and that style as well, and what the character would have. So like we look at Wolf of Wall Street, you
Yes.
know, the famous Lamborghini Countach that is just wrecked
Yes.
beyond belief, and you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's like, those things are hard enough to get out of
Yes.
on their own, let alone when you're tripping on whatever he was tripping on.
Yeah.
And, you know, so he's crawling out of that, but like they've left that one
The way it is.
the way it is, crushed, you know, crashed with all of that stuff. And yeah, it went up for auction for over $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because it's funny. I was seeing some comments on there of like, you know, on Hemmings of, you know, should they restore it or should they, you know, leave it as is? And it's like, why would you ever restore that?
Yeah, why?
You're losing
yeah.
a lot of value.
Now it's just going to be another white Countach.
It's just another white Countach that's been in a wreck and it's been fixed.
Right,
So
right.
then it's even
So it's an
worse.
insurance. So it's an insurance claim.
Yeah. So it's a salvage title. It's So it's no. You leave that, and that is the Wolf of Wall Street car. You'll
Well,
make
now
more
you know,
off of that.
honestly, that was popular though. Back in the 50s, even James Dean's Death Car was you know, toured all around the country. So it's kind of common for these kind of movie cars to tour around.
Yeah.
You know, even I can remember Paul Lamont from American Graffiti touring around the hot rod circuit with, you know, a Milner copy. And he was signing autographs, you know, that was kind of a thing. Eddie Munster, he would, you'd see those guys kind of signing around.
Dragula, and the Munster Coach.
Yeah. So it's kind of, you know, pretty common to see these movie cars to be toured around or in a museum or, you know, in an installation someplace.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Peterson's done a great job with that too, where they've,
they have the Hollywood cars.
They have
They
Hollywood cars
have
there.
that kind of exhibit section
Yeah.
of it. And some of them, if they're been crashed up, like you kind of have to leave them,
Right.
you know, crashed up, especially like I said, a lot of these car movies or iconic cars are built around car chases.
Right.
You know, they're built around like the stunts, you know, of the cars and, you know, a lot of times you'd have kind of your specific things that would launch a car and make it spin and barrel roll or, you know, do the J-turn into, you know, a cop car or something. And so there's always kind of, you know, a lot of the stunts and the car chases that became iconic as well as the cars themselves.
Right. Right.
So I think probably that's where we need to kind of go next is just car chases and car stunts in general. I mean, I think this has been fun looking at a lot of these and behind the scenes, but this is going to be a real fun one.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of the ones we've talked about, we've cracked a little bit on what they did in the movies or in the TV show because they were in a car chase, but now it's really diving.